Hey, good morning, or actually good afternoon. I don't know what time it is because we've been through a time change and I'm on East Coast time. So, hello. My name is Tracey Welson-Rossman. I'm Chief Marketing Officer of Chariot Solutions. We're a software consulting firm out of Philadelphia. I'm also the founder of Tech Girls, which is a nonprofit to help middle school girls embrace the power of technology for their future careers. And thank you. So I've been working in the tech community, tech startup community for a while now. And I've enjoyed the freedom to innovate, and working in small companies has, I think, been a little bit easier to try things on a short period basis, fail, succeed, repeat, that whole thing. So it's been awesome for me to be able to experiment that way. But I think we could all be in agreement that large corporations have really not been seen in that way over the last many, many years. And they've been seen as locations of really just not nimbleness. But over the last decade, we've definitely seen that there's been more an adoption of startup methodologies and mindsets. So although this panel did start out as women using technology to disrupt their industry, as we started to book the speakers, a theme started to emerge. Startups with and within, outside and within the corporate enterprise. So today, I'm lucky to be joined by 3 women who are leading their enterprises' innovation efforts. So we're going to start off. After I get myself organized here, we're going to start off with everyone introducing themselves, and each person talking about their organization, and then just a quick question of how did you each get involved in tech and innovation, and how did you think that you'd end up here? Why don't we start with Ebony?
Okay. Hi, guys. Can you hear me? Awesome. I, too, am still waking up a little bit, but so my name is Ebony Lee. I'm a Senior Vice President at Comcast, and I work with a team that has the unique pleasure of working with startups and also incubating and launching internal startups as we look for new ways of delivering new technology and new business ventures to the world. In terms of how I got started in tech, I would definitely say I didn't expect to be here necessarily. I was a pretty traditional kind of background with business and finance and so forth, but I really loved solving hard problems. I love doing work where there's no blueprint, there's no map, but you have to just go figure it out. That's very motivating to me. And if I, at the risk of dating myself a little bit, I remember in the early 90s, there was this campaign on TV with AT&T, this You Will campaign, and it would say things like, you know, can you ever imagine looking at your home when you're not at home, or checking on your home when you're not at home, or, you know, speaking with your baby on your watch? And this was like early 90s. There was no iPhone. There was, you know, there were no things like that. And they would end the commercials with, "One day you will." And it's going to be brought to you by AT&T. And so I love those kind of really challenging problems and imagining what's possible in the future and figuring out how to get there. And I just feel like being in the tech space is the place to be when you really want to both solve hard problems but also impact change at a huge scale. So as I kind of started my career, I did that in consulting and just migrated into the communications and high-tech practice, looking for those kind of problems to solve.
Awesome. Rose?
Hey, everybody. I'm Rose Ritts. I am the Chief Innovation Officer and an Executive Vice President at Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health. The university part, we have around 6,000 students, undergrads, medical school students, nursing, pharmacy, lots of things in the medical side. Our undergrad is focused on design, textiles, fabrics, and the merging of the two worlds is really a fascinating place to be. On the health system side, we have 13 hospitals, 3.8 million outpatient visits each year, so it's a lot of outpatient visits. It's a big health system. I come from a line of strong women, so shout out to my grandmothers and my mother. Yeah. My mother graduated from medical school in 1950. Yeah, not many women who did that. And for most of the women she knew who graduated in her class, she was at the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania, where you went to become a doctor in 1950 as a woman. Many of her colleagues thought, the thinking in that time was that when you made that choice, you weren't going to be a parent. You were giving up family to become a doctor. Very few of her classmates, and she kept up with many of them throughout her long life, had family. She was one of the few who did it. So awesome, great, go mom. So she really wanted me to be a doctor, and my whole life really pushed me into medicine. But she was a great doctor. She was a pediatrician who became a pediatric neurologist. So many emergency calls at all times, pulling her away from my birthday parties and other things that, as a kid, I wanted her to be at. So I decided not to do medicine. I got into the tech space. And I actually have a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford. So I thought that I was going to be a techie, like a tech developer. And I have worked at a number of startups. But at some point I realized in meeting other powerful women that they weren't following a technical path. It's interesting that they had gotten into management and thinking about how to drive technologies from a strategic perspective. And I had a lot of great mentors who kind of pushed me in that direction, that there's a way to keep your pulse on the tech at all times and still be in a strategic role. So I'm not surprised to be where I am, but I have a very entrepreneurial background. I've started a bunch of companies also. So it's an interesting space for somebody with a tech background, but it's a great one if you're really interested in the sort of strategic thinking end of things. And want to be able to drive where the future's going, which is what my mom always taught me we need to do. So, thanks.
And Lisha. Let's take it. And Lisha.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. First of all, let me just say Happy Women History Month and Happy International Women's Day this week. So my name is Lisha Davis, and I'm the founder and operator of Vanguard's Innovation Studio, located in downtown Philadelphia. It's just about 2 years old. And what we're doing there is, in short, trying to disrupt ourselves. So we run an internal venture studio model or an internal incubator model whereby there's about 40 individuals who come from all different walks of life, trying to tinker away at solving some of the most ambitious and challenging problems and opportunities within the wealth management space. So there's existing innovation teams throughout the rest of the enterprise working on things to make the core business better, faster, and cheaper. And our job is to be not constrained by any of that and try to essentially break the model and figure out a better way. Similar to Rose, I also come from a family of strong, I'll say, hard-headed women who really, when they think about things that are challenging or uncertain, kind of run towards that uncertainty. In fact, we have a saying in my family, if it's not hard, I don't want to do it. But nonetheless, I think landing in this role, heading up innovation, is quite a surprise to me. While I grew up within the industry and played a variety of different roles, first as an entrepreneur, so I ran my own financial planning and wealth management practice for a number of years, started when I was in college, to transitioning to more of a strategy and business operator background, having had the opportunity to have started and run various groups within different companies, including Vanguard. It was about 7 years ago that my journey with innovation formally began, when the company was just noticing the competitive environment was becoming increasingly challenging and we needed to do something to differentiate. So I was tasked with figuring out everything outside of the immediate investment product offer for one of our business lines. And I don't know if I raised my hand very highly for that one, or everyone took a step back and I was too slow and, okay, I'll do it. But boy, has it been the best journey and decision ever, because it was there that I learned about the underlying tools of innovation work, design thinking, systems thinking, lean and agile development. And so through the various roles of product owner, head of product and portfolio owner, and then ultimately in this role, heading up innovation, it's been such a wonderful journey. Happy to talk about it today.
All right, so we'll start with Ebony. As we were prepping, we had lots of great ideas that we're not going to be able to actually cover everything, but I think we need to start from the beginning, which is, can you talk about some of the different models of corporate innovation that are out there?
Sure. I would start by saying that corporate innovation for all of you inside a big company is hard. So let's just start with that premise. And I think the second thing I would say to begin this is that it's really critical to just keep trying different things. And so in my experience, I've been at Comcast for the past 10, going on 11 years, and every job I've had is a job that somebody didn't have before me because we're always trying to start something new. So I've never been inside of the core business. I've always been on teams trying to launch the next generation of a platform, trying to disrupt ourselves from within, and trying to create partnerships that help us get into new arenas. And so when we think about the different models that we've tested everything from, internal incubation. So, it's hard to go out and say you're, a pioneer in tech and innovation if you're not practicing what you preach. And so we've tried our best to identify opportunities inside the company that we can bring a different model to. And so when I started, we had a really tiny project that is now the X1, where we try to reimagine what was possible in delivering a video experience if we had none of the baggage of our legacy infrastructure and legacy practices. And so we had a vision, we built a team off-site. We literally rented space. We are all from Philadelphia. We moved from downtown Philadelphia into the suburbs of Radnor to literally have physical distance from the core business. And we started with a handful of people who did work and come from the core business, but we then hired people from as many different places as possible to help us rethink how to build and deliver the next generation video experience. We hired people who would think differently about design and think differently about how to deliver our video over IP technology and keep pace with the accelerating kind of innovation happening out there. And so that's one model, which is, to be the challenger team inside the organization with the right kind of leeway and flexibility and funding and executive support to go reimagine a critical part of the business and do it outside of the business. But then we've also learned over time that's important to not just build our internal capability, but to be open and honest about where we need partners to help supplement our capabilities. And so part of the team that we've built is really focused on identifying those capabilities that are not, that are critical to our future, but not yet capabilities that we have internally. And so we think differently about how to partner, how to invest in companies with those kind of ideas. And investing and partnering with startups is part of that formula, right? How do you sit side by side with startups who are thinking differently about how to build businesses, how to approach these problems, and get inspiration by helping them, and then get an early peek into what is coming and potentially disrupting our business long term. So those are just two examples. I'm sure there's many more, but we kind of try to test and learn and balance both the internal incubation and starting internal startups and then working externally to kind of stay ahead of the game as well.
And Rose and Lisha, if you would like to add anything to that?
Maybe the thing that I'll add is I think there's many models out there that are effective, and it really depends on what you're trying to achieve within the organization. So if you primarily care about outcomes and outputs, so I want a series of really innovative hits, you may not have to have an internal innovation lab. You can outsource much of it. It could be faster and cheaper. But if you actually care about changing the way that you work and problem solve from within, or changing the makeup of your workforce such that innovation is a discipline, then oftentimes there needs to be this experiential learning component whereby you can't just outsource everything. You also want to learn how to do for yourselves. So maybe as an addition to what Ebony shared, the model that we run is more of the latter, whereby, yes, there are very much internal teams working with external teams to produce innovation work, but we're also tasked with serving as the tip of the spear, if you will, to help showcase new ways of working to the organization and help to spread more of a movement such that we're not the only place that innovation activity can take place.
Good, okay. And I know that was a little bit of the next question that we were going to ask you, so if you want to continue with just the idea of how large institutions are encouraging the innovation, not just Vanguard, but maybe some of the other models that you've seen.
Sure, it's all the craze, right? How many buzzwords have we all heard? Digital transformation, client experience, this and that, incubators and labs. I think it's great. Large organizations are certainly realizing that, hey, what got them here and being successful is not going to keep them here if they don't do something different. So I think there's in addition to the models that we talked about before, there's other things that have become very interesting whereby, and Rose, I think you can probably speak to this even more, investing in the startup community and building entrepreneurial ecosystems is something that corporations are starting to take a role more and more, whether it's CVC, corporate venture capital arms, or labs and incubators that specifically serve as a sandbox for external startups to come in and work. I think those are all very interesting models as well. Maybe the key difference, in addition to what we shared around, do you want it to be lasting, and do you want fish or do you want to be fishermen, is thinking through your organization's culture and what you think would be required or what's needed in order to drive something through to fruition and market at scale, right? So handoff risk is very real. I think all of us can attest to there's no shortage of awesome startups and ideas, whether internally and externally, but once they become developed, what happens there? So those are things that I think very much are part of the consideration set when thinking through what's the right corporate innovation model you want to pull.
So Rose, what are some of the trade-offs that you're seeing with corporate innovation, and what are some of the roadblocks that you still come up with, even if you have a supportive organization?
I came to Jefferson because of our president and CEO, Steve Klasko. I don't know if any of you have seen his TED Talk or heard him speak, but he's like Mr. Innovation. He's very, very passionate about innovation being his signature. Before this, I had been at Duke, and our president and CEO was very much, his entire focus was global expansion and global experience, and it was great. I did other wonderful projects when I was there. So Jefferson is committed to innovation, and innovation needs funds, as you said. If you're always at the mercy of what other people are willing to fund, then you're being reactive, and you can't be proactive, and proactive is the fun, creative part of it. Well, no, there are smart people out there putting money in, so I won't say it's the only way to be proactive and smart. Some of the things that other people fund are great. So when I came there, I knew I had a budget. I talked to, before I came, I said, hey, what's my budget? How many people do I hire? And I really made sure that I was going to be well-funded and well-staffed before I took the job. So it is a very, very supportive organization. Having said that, we're a 13-hospital health system trying to keep people out of the hospital. That's what innovation means to us. To keep you healthy, to keep you, so you don't need to be an inpatient in our facility. Who wants to be an inpatient? Until we figure out that flip, we're in this strange transition time where the things that we do when we succeed, success looks like lower revenue for many of our traditional core business lines, like our inpatient flow of patients within the hospital. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge to, even in a very committed organization, when you begin to see some of the numbers slipping because you're succeeding, and perhaps the dollar financial payoff for those things. So you both have to have an organization that is behind innovation, but realize that there's a patient factor, and there's going to have to be some other things, the budgeting of how we fill the gap. So that's one thing. Another thing, I'll just go with one more, is that there's this move within many types of organizations, but certainly within health systems now, to expand and to merge with other people to form larger and larger entities because of economies of scale and other things. So since I've been at Jefferson, we've gone from an 8-hospital system to a 13-hospital system. we merged with Abington Health, which brought 3 new hospitals, Jefferson Health in New Jersey, which brought 3 new hospitals. And every time, we don't just say, great, the old person who worked for the core organization is going to be the head of cardiology or the head of infectious disease. There's actually a process where the good people, we try to, who was the best one at each place. And we have made people from the places that joined us the head of various things. But what that means is that we're always merging, jockeying, who's going to stay, who's going to leave, who is the best, which model of work that are we going to bring into the core organization. And that's stressful for people. And it takes a lot of energy, merging, growing. We're adding 2 more that haven't been publicly announced very shortly. So when that's happening, when there's so much change and growth within the organization, it takes energy from people, even if they want to be innovative. And that has been a challenge, too. Having said that, there's a core group of people who love doing it. But yeah, you have to think through how to get passionate people past, how can you protect their jobs and let them know that if they're focused on an innovation program, they're not going to be somebody who's downsized, is an important thing to think through.
Ebony and Lisha, do you have any other comments for that? Okay, we could go on.
We could go
okay.
on and on
Well,
about the roadblocks. I think we face similar ones. I think the hard part is that I try to remind myself and our teams that everyone's doing their job, right? And everyone has the best of intentions, that different groups have different objectives and different incentives. So part of our job is to help reframe what we're doing, to put it in a light that helps that person do their job better, or that gives them an opportunity to do something that's, like someone on my team likes to say, is the 11th thing on their roadmap that maybe they can't get to, but they really need to, right? And so I think it's important to figure out how to kind of partner with those internal stakeholders that you need to help accelerate or scale or get something done with new innovation. But remember what their interests are and what their objectives are, and figure out a way to meet them a little bit closer to where they are.
So why don't we continue with you and sort of that theme of, building that culture of innovation in a large organization that may not be seen as a risk-taking organization, and how do you build also that culture of smart risk-taking?
I mean, I do think, like Rose says, it starts by having leadership that has your back, right? So that when you're out there in the organization trying to convince people this is the right thing to do, that your leadership team fully supports your efforts in this area. So that's number one. Number two, I think it's, finding the middle point, right? Finding the shared interest or common objective with those teams that you need to get on your side. I also think it's just really important to foster, an environment of experimentation. And I know it sounds cliche, but I think, sometimes people think they have to make a huge decision about innovation, that this is the answer, versus, we're trying to figure out what the next opportunity is in the smart home. Let's take a kind of low-risk, lightweight experiment that's not going to cost the organization a ton of resources, that's not going to distract the core business from what they need to do, but we are all invested in the future of the smart home. Let's find some low-risk, lightweight experiments to test whether these new innovations can help accelerate that roadmap. So understanding what the business is trying to achieve, understanding what their interests are, finding ways to position your innovation partnership or your innovation program as an accelerant to what they're doing, I think is one of the key things that we've learned over the years of trying to get the organization to assume a little bit of risk and then lower the barriers. Like this, we're not making a decision for the next 10 years, we're making the decision for the next couple months. And then we'll see how the output is, we'll measure the output, and if we see the traction, let's try it for another few months, and let's try it for another few months. But we don't have to sign the organization up for a 10-year commitment to something that we're just trying to see if there's a there there. You know what I mean?
So it's a little bit about internal selling and really thinking about, it's not something that we talk about a lot. We talk about culture being there and building culture, but you're helping to not de-risk, but just make things more palatable for people. Because change is hard. So I love that answer.
I'll just add, perhaps it's another cliche word of South by Southwest, but storytelling. So if you saw downstairs, we have this cool demo of Jefferson 3D printing in the clinical space. Thinking about how do we use 3D printing in the clinical space. When any of us in innovation start talking to a clinician, like, hey, like we got this cool 3D printing capability, how do you think we might use it in your space? They just look confused, like, I don't know. Wow, how would I use 3D? I don't know. But when we start telling the stories that you could see downstairs, like if you have to remove a bone and fit a plate after you remove the bone, we could make your 3D print of what it will look like when that bone is gone, so you can make the plate or the insert before the surgery and not leave the patient on the table for half an hour, which is risky to them and costs us money. Then they're like, oh, okay, like that's cool. And then you tell them some other example and some other example. So storytelling then helps people realize that they're innovators. Everybody, I'm a believer, like there are different opinions on that, but I'm a believer that everyone is an innovator. We just have to, it's our job to help them get in the headspace and to get them thinking about what they could do.
That's another good answer. I love that. Did you want to add?
How do you top that? Look, I super agree and couldn't echo those sentiments more. Maybe the other ad that I'll throw on there is, yes, it's very much internal selling. I would say what has helped us a lot is around a spirit of transparency and show not tell, to essentially condition the organization's mindset and behaviors to actually support a different way of working completely. Currently, most large organizations that are very successful, they have clients and assets and brand and revenue. There is a lot of risk that they need to mitigate. So a lot of their decision-making and policies and procedures take on a risk mitigation bent. But innovation work is about exploring the unknown. And so if you're always going to be living in a bubble, you're never going to reach out there and find something. So, and if you try to then get from current state to there overnight, it's too jarring for people, and even if they have the right intention, they're not going to know how to grab it for themselves. So we actually spend a lot of time in what we'll call organizational readiness or conditioning as a work stream, whereby we are teaching and educating on what it means to work in this different way. We will deconstruct the processes that we use. We've redefined value and metrics, right? Because traditional MPV and ROI, without doing a lick of math, it's going to be negative for a very long time. So those aren't necessarily going to be the right measures to gauge our progress and success. So what do those bite-sized incremental stage gates look like? And how rigorous can we actually be to demystify? It's not just about throwing spaghetti on the walls, but let's blend what people are very accustomed to in the types of metrics and lingo and KPIs that they're dealing with kind of some of this new world. So it's, at the end of the day, it's behavior change.
Well, I think you went into another question.
I'm
but
sorry.
That's okay, because we're nothing but nimble up here. I'm going to just segue over to Rose, and one of the things that we had talked about was metrics. So I think that's where we can pick up. How do you when you might be in negative, how do you have those metrics so that you're internal selling the value of what you're putting out there from an innovation standpoint?
So I came from the startup world, had a bunch of my own startups, an IPO, an acquisition, a failure, various things along the way. And I've invested in a number of companies. So if you have a startup, come talk to me about that afterwards. But the innovation work has to be sustainable. So part of the metric is money. If you lose money year after year after year doing innovation, it's not sustainable. It's not. Nobody's going to want to have that happen. So for me, one of the things, it's another whole conversation when you're coming up through the ranks, but as the head of innovation taking this job at Jefferson, when I got there, I told them something which I've now delivered on, which is it's going to take me 4 years. You're going to need to invest money, give me people, and after 4 years, I will generate revenue that pays back the entire 4 years of cost that you just put into me. We will be cost neutral, and after the 4th year, we will move into revenue positive territory. I say that and I deliver on it, and I've done that in the past for other organizations. You have to be willing to talk about the bottom line. So we just had our first $5.6 million payoff on a Jefferson project this fiscal year. I've been there 3 years. And we're very close to achieving this metric, so I think we'll do it. So there's no way around it. You can't pretend that there are other metrics and that money doesn't matter. You have to have a sustainable. You have to think about that and just start talking about it from the very beginning. How long it's going to take, it's hard. It's hard to assert that. It's hard to deliver on it. But to me, that is the critical metric that you have to think about when you're starting an innovation program. When does it become revenue positive? How do you get there? And then deliver on it and make people understand it from the get-go. It's going to take X amount of time. It could be 12 years. It could be 15 years. When I started my first company and pitched to venture capitalists, we told them it's going to take 8 years to be revenue positive. And we got investors who gave us money with the 8 years. That wouldn't happen today. It was a very different time. People want a different time to return on investment. But I think we'll see a flow in that too. I think, in fact, investors are more patient today with when they need to see their cash out than they were even 18 months ago, 12 to 18 months ago. So there's cycles of these things, and always have an answer. How do I get to sustainability?
I think it's so important because, I think people sometimes assume that innovation is this really creative thing, and there's actually a lot of discipline to innovation. And I think it's really important to set those expectations and to be transparent, but help people along the way show that you're making progress, right? So we're not going to wait 4 years to look back and see if we did it, but along the way, what are those proof points? What are those pieces of evidence of actual traction that whatever the project is that you're trying to prove? And so we all need to try to do better, and we're trying to do this internally as well, of setting clear expectations, not just of what the future outcome holds in terms of value to the organization, but along the way, what are those proof points that we can all be looking for so that we can all have an honest conversation about what's working and what's not working. And then if we fall off plan, at least we've been having a conversation along the way and saying these are the changes we're going to make to get back on track, or maybe we've learned that there's a slightly different plan we need to pursue. So I think it's also important just to keep that conversation about what your endpoint is, what your objectives are, but also how you're showing those proof points along the way.
I'm just going to have a little dialogue about that. So something to really watch out for, though, is that sometimes in doing that, you set up these metrics just because you can that aren't really valuable. So people love to count patents. Like, how many patents do you have? How many people are involved in programs? And yes, having a system that didn't have any events, having people show up, or how many things have we invested in. But really, none of those are going to matter, right? Unless they're the good ones.
Exactly.
So it's hard sometimes because we are driven. Of course, we do have other metrics of numbers of deals that we get done every day, number of new projects that get started, the number of different people across the organization. But putting too much weight on them can be like a false metric if it takes you off track.
Well, I think that you also just have to be customized, right, to the specific project at hand. So if we're investing in a new area, let's be clear about what we're trying to do there. Is it about seeing that the customer actually wants it? Okay, what is the customer's willingness to pay? Are we getting actual customers to sign up? Is there an actual letter of intent that I can point to that says they have interest in this product or not? So I'm looking for those leading indicators of the business value at the end of the day, not just kind of check marks, right? To say we did this, we did this, we did that. But what are those underlying drivers that give you some confidence that you'll get to those business metrics at the end of the day?
Lisha, are there any myths or misconceptions that people have about working in innovation?
Yeah. Yes. I think we're starting to touch on some of these things. We hear a lot that, oh, you guys are so lucky. You're wearing jeans and you're doing whatever. And there's Post-its everywhere and you're eating donuts and, there's a dog in the... some of those things, yes. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And there's a reason why these creative spaces are set up the way that they are, to engage in more kind of informal, open discussions. And we find ourselves, and I think a couple of folks from the studio, from my team, are here, I've never worked longer hours, actually, than this job. They happen to be at odd hours because we have that flexibility, but to Ebony's point, there's a lot of discipline and rigor that's required to do innovation in a sustainable, responsible, good way. And so one of the things that, one of the myths that we hear is it's all fun and games. No, it's not. Another one we hear is, oh, it's all about the idea, right? And look, ideas matter a lot. It's certainly one important ingredient to the innovation equation, but that's actually not the one that I worry about. Finding the right problem to solve and having good problem market fit is hard. Then certainly finding the right solution to kind of get after that is as well. But just to give you a little bit of an example, for each ambitious problem that we've sought out to solve in the innovation studio, typically we have upwards of 500 plus ideas to get after them. So that's not the really, really hard part. It's finding the valuable problem to solve. And then maybe the last thing that I'll say is I think there's another myth that if you just have really good technology, then you'll be very successful. And we like to think about ourselves as problem solvers, leveraging the right tools and capabilities to make the solutions real. And our work is inclusive of, but not limited to, technology. And by definition of working on some of the more futuristic Horizon 3 oriented work, oftentimes the solution involves a business model innovation that can be powered by, enabled by technology. So not leading with the hammer, the tech itself has also been kind of an important myth for us to help the organization understand.
So I'm going to have a question for all of you, and then see if we can take a couple questions out in the audience. So this question is, for those of our audience or out in our live stream that are working as startups, how do you work with startups, and any advice you could give those startups for working with a large corporation?
Okay, so there are a lot of startups in the healthcare space, obviously. When I first got to Jefferson, it was actually part of my job to vet all of the startup companies. Which one should we be early adopters of their tech? Which one should we partner with? With Dr. Klasko, our fearless leader out there giving the kind of talks you get, I quickly realized that was like a huge full-time job just in itself. And I'm a startup person, so my passion really is pulling the ideas out of our internal clinical folks and turning those into new ventures. So we started a whole new group within Jefferson called the Strategic Partnerships Group. I believe I have that right. And their entire focus is vetting companies that want to work with us and figuring out if they're the right partnerships. And they have a whole process. It's very, there's a venture capital-like element, like, do we think you're going to exist in a year if we start working with you? Are you around to stay? Do you have enough money? So often the idea sounds great, but it's going to take a lot for our organization to move to where you are. And if we don't believe you're going to be around when we get there, it's hard. So I know that that's a big part of their question. And then, of course, there are sort of data exchange issues. That's becoming a huge issue because so many of the startups now are in the data exchange space. And there are ways to work with health systems where you get access to our data. We have documents and ways that can happen, but they're complicated. You're going to have to hire a lawyer to get through them, and you're going to have to realize and make that part of your startup cost to figure out how to have the health system trust you enough to exchange data. So a lot of times I think startup companies underestimate the amount of legal help they're going to need, both to interact with other small businesses, but also to interact with us. Make that part of your plan. If you're starting a company, that build that into your model. It's really, really important.
That's great advice.
Yeah. So at Comcast, we have a similar approach. We are very serious about finding and working with startups who are thinking about the next generation of media technology and communications and so forth. And so we have something that's called Lift Labs for Entrepreneurs, which we created to be a front door for startups who are interested in working with us in some way. we find we have a family of brands, everything from traditional Comcast cable under the Xfinity brand to NBC, to our studios with Universal Pictures, to theme parks. There are a huge range of opportunities across our company that are looking to innovate in different ways. And what we found is that it could be really hard for startups to figure out where to start to engage in a conversation with Comcast, NBC, Universal. And so Lift Labs was created with that similar premise of let's have a starting point for startups to engage with us. We have a team of people who can meet with them, vet them, and figure out how they can navigate the right parts of the organization. We have a few different programs. One is a very formal accelerator powered by Techstars, where we select 10 to 12 companies every summer to come work with us in Philadelphia who are really working in some key focus areas that our business is interested in accelerating. But outside of the accelerator, we have another program where we're just meeting startups all the time. We'll make direct connections, facilitate all of this hard work of what does it take to structure a proof of concept if there's an internal business leader who's interested in working with that startup. How do you streamline the legal process? How do you get all of the security reviews done quickly? How do you structure something so that you know that in a very short period of time, it's either worth continuing investing in that relationship or not. I think most startups, what we've heard, appreciate a faster no or a faster yes. And as a company, as a big company, sometimes we take a long time in getting to that. So we try through our Lift Off program to have a more structured approach for introducing strategic startups to the right business leaders if we think there's a fit, and then facilitating the process of doing pilots or proofs of concepts. And then for all the other startups that we may not have kind of a direct opportunity with in the short term, we then will still offer mentorship, access to some of our subject matter experts if we can be helpful in them launching their business or solving specific problems, or access to some of our platforms to just amplify the work that they're already doing. So those are some of the ways that we try to work with startups, and the same advice, which is be patient with us.
Yeah, great. I would say just as a starting off point, we want to work even more with startups than we are now. So there's definitely much more room for improvement. But similar to what you guys have shared, there's kind of two avenues for us to engage with startups at Vanguard. One is with the core business, whereby the business units might be reaching out, or we could serve as the eyes and ears to be able to help facilitate the introduction that way. And the second path is within the studio itself. And it usually happens in kind of a reverse pitch type format, whereby we will activate our networks, incubators, VCs, the startup community, to kind of bulletin board some of the challenges or opportunity spaces that we're really interested in looking for viable solutions. And let's see what that yields us. So it might happen at the problem level, it might happen at the solution level, or it might happen at the underlying core capabilities required to make the solution real. So kind of that's what that looks like. And then I think the other part of your question was around, what might be just some good food for thought for startups who are thinking about working with the corporates. I think these ladies touched on some really good ones. I'd also say on top of that, first, bless you. Know, kind of when is the right time to approach the corporate, right? So typically the larger the corporate, there might be a tendency, and I think there's different instances whereby they very much want to have pre-seed or very, very early stage flow. But generally speaking, certainly for us in financial services, want to see some type of product market fit already proven out. So if you've got this great idea, but you haven't quite figured out the team and resources to make it real, please know that that may present some headwinds for you right up front. And it's going to be a relatively long journey for you to continue to showcase that progress and traction before you can get in. That's one. The two other things that I'll say is come to the table when you're pitching and actually pitch through the lens of the corporate looking to work with you and put some ideas on the table for how you would potentially partner and pilot. A lot of us like to try before you buy, and so selling this kind of big, lofty, well, this is the one way that I think may be a little bit challenging. And then finally, you have to decide for yourselves early and throughout what is the level of control that you absolutely must have when working with the corporate. A lot of times we can't help ourselves. We're going to want you to bespoke or custom tailor your baby for us. Is that cool with you? Yes or no, right? For funding, maybe. For control, even with that funding, maybe not. So I think to Ebony's point about getting a clear and fast yes or no, these would be some of the things that I'd urge you guys to think about as a community when you're approaching the table to the corporates.
Excellent advice. So there's okay, we have 10 minutes, so let's take some questions. I want to leave a little bit of time for one lightning round question.
Hi. First off, hello? Oh, hi. First off, thank you so much. You guys are so inspiring to a young female just to see you up here, sitting here and talking about all this. My first question for you, and I'll only ask one. So how does what you're saying about innovation from a product standpoint apply to innovating from a company standpoint, maybe in their policies or their workflow or their method of operations?
Go ahead.
Well, it's you can't do one without the other, I think. I mean, the reality is to bring some of these innovations to scale, you need the organization to move with you. And sometimes that means taking a slightly different approach to policies or processes that have been put in place for very good reason. Like, we didn't grow to be these large, companies for no reason. So, but I think we, have to sometimes figure out how to understand the underlying issue that they're trying to solve from a policy perspective, what they're trying to protect, and then I tell my team often, sit on the same side of the table as them. Look at the problem from the same vantage point, understand where they're trying to come from, and see if you can propose a different way to still achieve the same objective. So we have to work really closely with our attorneys and with regulatory and external affairs and so forth. And part of the process is just bringing them along with you. Don't come with here's the answer that you've been working on for the last, year, and then you're just engaging them at the last moment, and they're like, whoa, we need to rethink this whole thing. So I would say bring them along with you, sit on the same side of the table as them, and try to think creatively, just like you do when you're solving innovation problems for products or technology. Bring that same creativity to how to streamline some of these underlying processes and policies as well. If I had the answer, I would be a billionaire by now. But that's some initial advice.
I'll just add super quick. The stuff that's fun or easier to do is what lives above the waterline, right? Interacting with clients, testing your solution, trying to get traction. None of this is easy, but those are the things that are easier. What's really hard and will make or break you is what you don't see below the line. It's the policies and procedures. It's the compliance rules. It's the info security data sets. It's integrating your solution into the tech stack and infrastructure at the big organization. So some of it is a little bit of, you're just going to have to bump your head and go on the ride with us. But another part is looking for corporates who've actually designed a completely new set of rules to play in that incubator space, right? The first time a startup that we interacted with was like, oh my God, you gave me a 28-page NDA and IP document. We were like, that's the short form. You should feel excited about life, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of that, but in short, just as most of my team is working on the above-the-line solutions and developing the products and trying to bring them to market, there's actually a very small and mighty team that's very much connected and supported by headquarters that's working on crafting faster procurement policies, better vendor agreements, thinking about kind of allowing the startups that we engage with to have access to data in a safe and protected way.
I just did one other thing quickly. Know when what you're doing is groundbreaking and when it isn't. And sometimes it's groundbreaking within your field, but not other fields. So another thing I did is I worked at DARPA as a program manager, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. So a lot of times I will say, look, the Defense Department has figured this out, right? The Defense Department is using Amazon Cloud, so there's a way that we can use Amazon Cloud. Okay, the legal's going to have to get over it. We're not like the first place in the universe who has a security issue. Yeah, we got to protect patient data. It's important, but I think we can figure it out. And so know who else, do your work. Who else is doing something similar where you can make that your story, right? Every now and then you're really plowing new ground, and then you just need your CEO behind you. but so many times, you may think no one's else doing is what you're doing, but somebody in another industry, another country, somewhere else they're doing it. Know what that is and make that your story.
So thank you, ladies, for being examples of women running the world. I wanted to ask, with women only receiving about 2% of venture capital, minority women receiving 0.6% of venture capital as a result because 2% of women are making venture capital decisions. And when women do seek capital, it tends to be high net worth versus institutional money. What are your organizations doing to move that needle, or organizations you're working with to support women in this space?
I mean, it's a tough one, right? I think it starts by having people like us at the table and continuing to ask the question of why there aren't more. So I credit the team who runs Lift Labs for asking every time when we're engaging with partners to bring startups to the table, have they found female founders? We want more female founders. We started a program to get female founders and funders from the Philadelphia area together on a more regular basis to create more of a network and continue to highlight that there are great things already out there, and how can we elevate and amplify what they're doing and engage in conversation to attract even more. I wish we could do, there's always so much more we could be doing, but it starts by asking the hard question, shining a light on the problem, and challenging your business partners, challenging the people you're working with, challenging whoever you're working with to source deal flow to bring more female founders to the table, because that's your expectation.
Nothing. My organization doesn't do anything specific in that, but I personally do, which is, so that's not exactly your question, but so I try to mentor non-traditional types of CEOs when I find them, and I try to talk the guys into doing that too, with some success. So it's not just something that women are doing for other women. There are guys out there doing it too. When you talk to them about it and help them understand that it's a really important thing. It's hard for the corporates. It's to actually be doing stuff. But I think it's an individual thing in a growing network that we're all responsible for making happen at some level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great honor to be here, and also responsibility to continue pushing the boundaries and paying this back moving forward. I would say, similar to Rose, on a personal note, whether it's belonging to a female investor syndicate or mentoring startups specifically who are of women or minority founders, those are things that I personally am very committed to. But also within the corporate setting. So we've actually made a very strong argument, and thank goodness, I mean, I think Vanguard is very good about diversity and inclusion to begin with, but we've deliberately made it a point to say, hey, look, part of what makes the innovation studio so successful is because we have so much diversity of thought, and that is represented in all different forms. But as you can see, we kind of serve as the poster child of what that could look like. So at the studio, out of the 40 people, the vast majority of the leadership team happens to be women. I think we have maybe like a 65-35 split. Now, it wasn't a predetermined goal, but rather, to Ebony's point, flow from the pipeline standpoint, whether it's ideation, whether it's partnership agreements, whether it's vendors who we work with, and whether it's staff, making sure that true representation is there at the onset, and then we'll go through that entire selection process. Now, we will always pick the best people to hire or the best partners to engage with, but if you really start with that it's not 2% of the over incoming resource pool, but rather 50% or more, it's kind of one of the small ways that we're trying to make a difference.
I think we have time for one more.
Okay, great, thanks. This is a question from government. We're not very well known for innovation, but we are trying. In the city of Philadelphia, we have an Office of Innovation. And I'm curious about how you operationalize the below the waterline, process change and internal innovation culture. Is your innovation budget pegged to the size of your companies? Like, for instance, Rose, you talked about acquiring more hospitals. So when you innovate, you have to process change and culture change in all of those new settings. Like, are you allocated in each of your organizations, like, embedded staff in various departments that are like the innovation people, or does your budget grow as the organization grows? I'm just curious about how do you operationalize innovation? Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, the budget grows as the organization grows. And we haven't embedded, we have not embedded innovation teams specifically at each of the 13 hospitals yet, but we're talking about it. So it's so new, bringing this innovation focus within the health system, within the clinical part of the health system. Right now we have this thing we call Rose on the Road, which means I'm at all three of those. Yeah, alliteration is awesome, isn't it? So I'm at all 13 of these facilities on a regular basis. I love it, actually. But at some point, I'll get like a critical mass of ambassadors, innovation ambassadors at each place. And then I'll say, hey, let's create this enclave here and this enclave. We're not quite. But yeah, as you grow the organization, you have to grow the budget and the resources so that you can cover the more people that are in your purview.
So wait 1 minute, and I'm going to take it for lightning round. Really quickly, why should more women be looking at their innovation roles in their companies? 5 words or less.
Why not? That's literally my answer.
Power to versus power over. My motto, and it's 5 words.
All right. You can go over.
They all did it under 5 words, so diverse perspectives breeds better outcomes.
So thank you. Thanks to our panelists. I hope you enjoyed our conversation, and we can answer some questions post. Thanks.